We're going to talk about camera controls, and this movie in particular is about camera sensors. Now, when I say that, what I mainly am kind of thinking about here in terms of our control is the sensor size. So on the left we have a full frame sensor, and on the right we have a crop sensor. So you can kind of see the size difference of the rectangle here, split in half on the two cameras. And if I look, this is what it's really all about. So we're comparing a sensor size to a 35 millimeter negative. That's about 1 inch by 1.25 inches if you measured it out. So the question is, why do we have these choices? Why do we care about full frame sensors versus crop sensors? Well, to sum it up, the full frame sensor has some advantages. You have more resolution in a lot of cases. You also have better quality of capturing color, saturation, and then also contrast, getting more detail in the highlights and shadows in a lot of ways. They usually render noise issues better, especially at higher ISOs. And then you can actually get shallower depth of field with lenses on the full frame sensors. So that may appeal to you as a creative control. So those are our big things. Now, before I proceed, if you don't have a full frame sensor, it doesn't mean you have a bad camera. It just means you don't have a full frame sensor. So you could do a lot of cool stuff with crop sensor cameras. I own two crop sensor cameras and one full frame. I use them for different purposes. So here's a sensor size comparison chart. On the left, that is kind of our cell phone cameras where it says like 1/3, and on the right, that is our full frame there. And you can kind of see the differences here. So the APS-C, that's kind of like our checkout cameras for the most part. So those are in general, your checkout Canon Rebels and your checkout like Nikon 3300s. The DX, you see, that's really, it also pertains to how Nikon makes lenses specifically for their crop sensor cameras. So you'll see that DX on those type of lenses there. The APS-H, you might find some cameras that are kind of slightly in between. It's not as common of a sensor size. So this is from 2012, but you can kind of see some popular camera models that were around that time. I'm going to direct your attention to where it says right here, this rectangle in this part right here, it says Nikon 1 CX format. Oops, let me go back one. And what you see there is that is kind of an interesting format. You'll see these pocket-sized cameras that can shoot camera raw that are kind of popular. Probably the most popular is the Sony RX100. And it fits in your pocket. It usually has a retractable built-in lens, a lot of them. And it's kind of cool. That's the sensor size. So there are some limitations with it, but it's cool in a lot of aspects. The Micro Four Thirds, like that Olympus Pen series, is next up there. A lot of people love those type of cameras. They're small, portable, so you'll see those a lot. And then you get into the more common ones that we're used to, going above, but the full frame on top. So that's your typically like your on the Nikon side, your 600 or your 700 series. Currently, there's like a D750 on the market, 800 series. On the Canon side, you've got your Mark, 5 or whatever kind of version they have there. Our 6Ds are in the studio, so those are all possibilities. So next up, we have our crop sensors, and this is a comparison table with sensor sizes and our different types of basically focal lengths for lenses. So you'll see if we compare the normal 50 millimeter on a full frame, the equivalent that that full frame does, or that 50 millimeter does from a full frame to a crop sensor, is 75 millimeters. And if we do the math, it's not that hard. So if you do 50 times 1, that's 50, and then times the 0.5, that's 25. So 50 plus 25 equals 75. So the Nikon crop sensor crop factor is 1.5, and that's how you get that. Now, if you look at the wide angles, you'll see that if you try to put an ultra wide 10 millimeter lens focal length on a crop sensor, you only get 15. So you can kind of see that it's hard to get wider angle lenses. That's one of the advantages of the full frame there. Now, on the other hand, you get kind of this appearance of a telephoto lens. What it really is you're looking at the center of the lens. So this next image might help you see that better. So the little rectangle in the center, that is what the crop sensor camera sees with the same lens focal length. And then on the outer one, that is the full frame sensor. So you can kind of see that difference there. Here's a result. So a 70 millimeter lens on a full frame on the left, on the crop sensor on the right. So it has the appearance of telephoto, but you're really just seeing less image area. The depth of field thing here, this kind of helps you to understand that, but essentially the DX is Nikon's crop sensor and FX is Nikon's full frame lens line there, and you can kind of see that if you look at the arrows there, there's less depth of field possible on the FX format. So if you like blurry backgrounds around subjects, that's an advantage for the full frame sensors. I hope that helped get some of these confusion out of the way of what the difference between full frame crop sensor is. But for our beginning photo classes, crop sensor cameras are perfectly fine.